Um, Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you can join us all here today. I'm Hansika Singh, Director of System Change Practice at Socratus. As people continue to join in, a very warm welcome to this event that's very special to us, the launch of the Climate Charche FGD Report. This is a collaborative initiative between Bengaluru Sustainability Forum and Socratus, which is rooted in trust, participation, and dialogue. Today, we are spotlighting voices often left out, those of vulnerable communities that have to navigate complex realities at the intersection of urban water and climate change. We'll get started shortly. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat function. Meanwhile, you'll also see the Q&A box where you can keep putting in your questions, and we'll try our best to respond to them as the event goes on. And do let us know where you're joining from in the chat box. Thank you. So a short agenda for today, for the next hour. So the next half hour, we'll hear from a range of inspiring voices who will speak to how this report and its approach contributes to the broader vision for resilient and inclusive cities. And in the following half hour, the FGD and the report team will walk us through the process, how the insights are structured, and our journey of visual storytelling and the many, many learnings through it all. A little bit about Socrates before we begin. At Socrates, we use tools from systems thinking, cognitive science, technology, and design to address wicked problems. We work towards surfacing collective wisdom necessary for a flourishing society on a thriving planet. Our work spans across key systems like food, energy, cities, and we rarely host events that are this one-way talking, but today is an exception for us. I would like to kick off this webinar by inviting our wonderful collaborators and partners, Bengaluru Sustainability Forum and Mansi particularly from there, to speak a bit about BSF, the broader Climate Charche series, of which this FGD series were a part of. Over to you, Mansi.
Yeah, thanks, Hansika. I'll restart saying that Vinita and I are really excited to be here at this point today. This has been an enriching journey for us at the Bengaluru Sustainability Forum. And we truly believe that the path to a sustainable future for Bengaluru and all who live here must be built through such collaborative engagements. To briefly introduce the Bengaluru Sustainability Forum, we are an inter-institutional initiative born out of a simple question. How can we support the great work already happening in the city around environment and sustainability by connecting it to robust research, policy, and civil society? And our aim is to build a holistic understanding of sustainability in the urban and peri-urban context by curating interdisciplinary conversations and collaborations. So we bring together academics, researchers, practitioners, social advocates, citizens, with the belief that a collective approach is the key to a just and sustainable future. We are anchored at the National Center for Biological Sciences with partner institutes, including Azim Premji University, Biome Environmental Trust, IIHS, Science Gallery Bengaluru, and the Wipro Foundation. And at the heart of everything we do are four key principles: conversations, collaborations, interdisciplinarity, and a collective approach. Our formats are fairly varied. We organize retreats, panel discussions, workshops, exhibitions, webinars, film screenings, and more, each designed to explore a specific theme or issue from multiple perspectives and for different audiences. We also run a small grants program through which we support innovative, hyperlocal, on-ground interventions across the city. And I encourage you to browse through the almost 40 projects we have supported over the past 6 years. They offer a rich glimpse into the people, organizations, and ideas shaping urban sustainability in Bengaluru across the thematic areas of urban water, biodiversity, waste, and climate. So, at a recent retreat on climate change, on climate resilience, one clear takeaway for us was that there is a need to broaden climate conversations and build a more nuanced city specific understanding. While climate change is global, its impacts are felt most acutely at the local level. In cities like Bengaluru, it affects everything from how we get water and housing to how we move around and even our health. These systems are all important on their own, but the interconnectedness is what really shapes how livable the city is. And with climate related disruptions and children-related disruptions. I apologize for that. Um, as the climate-related disruptions are becoming more frequent, we can't afford to look at these in silos. So we need an integrated approach that recognizes and responds to overlapping challenges, limited resources, vulnerable livelihoods, and a weak support systems, which centers resilience and justice. Equally important is grounding climate action in real lived experience. So policies are most effective when they reflect how people are already coping and adapting. And that precisely is what led us to create the Climate Charche series, a set of engagements exploring the link between climate and city systems, with a focus on adaptation, resilience, and justice. True to BSF's approach, this was also a collaborative effort with many partners contributing in different ways. One key component was the focus group discussions with Socrates, which you'll hear more about in this session. We also explored other formats. So with the CMR University School of Architecture, we created a 6-part lecture series for final year students to highlight the role of sustainability in design. With Kriti Film Club, we brought Eco Reels Film Festival to Bengaluru, using films and discussions to open up climate conversations with young people and the wider public. Next slide, please. The Climate Charche Open Series was focused on building capacity through hands-on workshops and webinars, where we had sessions on geospatial decoding, on systems thinking, life cycle assessment, and it drew a strong response and basically revealed a demand for accessible and practical learning for professionals in the field. This year, we are looking to build on these learnings and invite a deeper dialogue on how to take all of this work forward. We have also started work on a podcast aimed at demystifying climate terms and research, using them as entry points to unpack global and local challenges, and also to clear up some common misconceptions like the difference between air pollution and climate change. Sometimes a number of these things are just thought of to be the same, but they're aligned, not exactly the same. So I'll just end with saying that, as we all know, climate change is global, impacts are deeply local. And if we are serious about building resilience, we need to center people's everyday realities and make climate thinking an integral part of how we live, work, and plan every day. I'll now hand over the session back to Hansika. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mansi. Those of you who don't know about the Bengaluru Sustainability Forum, please look up their work. We are so grateful to have an anchor institution like this in the city, and they host some of the most amazing and interesting events. So do check them out. Before moving forward, and now you can see our keynote speaker's bio is on the screen, but just a quick note, we had originally planned to launch both the English and Kannada versions of the report today. However, the Kannada version is running a little bit behind the schedule and it'll be available shortly. So our apologies for that. Now I would like to invite Bhargavi Rao to launch the report. Some people are institutions in themselves, and Bhargavi Rao is one of those names. Anyone who has spent any time working in Bangalore doesn't need an introduction to her, but we'll do this anyway. Bhargavi works at the intersection of community action with law, policy, planning, and governance. She has over 30 years of experience across research, advocacy, campaign, and teaching in a variety of human rights, governance, and people-centered initiatives, and in advancing environmental and social justice. She's an independent researcher and educator and wears many other hats, as you can see from her bio on the screen. With that, Bhargavi, may I invite you to formally launch our report?
Thank you, Hansika, for that very kind introduction. So happy to show this report and launch it. I would also request all our speakers for today to hold a copy of this report. Yes, are we ready for a picture now? Mansi, Rohit, whoever is taking a picture.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I invite others on the screen like Hansika to also hold a copy?
Great.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to you, Bhargavi.
Yeah, thanks again to everybody at Socratus and the Bangalore Sustainability Forum. Namaskara, Adab, Jai Bhim to everyone. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity for, bringing me in for the launch of the report and asking me to say something as part of the keynote. So I would like to begin by congratulating each and every one of you who's been part of this initiative and on the successful release of this very timely and important report. I think it's a great piece of work. I truly enjoyed it from the minute I received it. I read it back to back, nonstop till I finished it. It was very engaging, and the artwork is also amazing. It is, it just holds you page after page. So bringing out such a report is not a small task. It requires a lot of rigor, persistence, and deep engagement with the issues and the people who are involved in it. So while we have gathered here online to release these findings, it is not just to share what was captured with the community, but it is also to confront truth on how unprepared we are as a city to address the impacts of climate change in Bengaluru and how it is impacting the lives of those who have long lived on the edge. So we continue to read in newspapers over the past decade as to how the city has recorded longer, harsher summers and dangerously rising nighttime temperatures as well. But it's also time to ask, who feels this most? Obviously, none of us, and not anybody sitting in gated communities or green enclaves, but it is those who live in the narrow settlements of some of the most disadvantaged parts of our city, where their shelters are covered with tin and tarpaulin, mostly along the edges of neighborhoods or even outside the city, where it's a invisible worker colony that actually builds and serves the city, where families sleep on rooftops under the open sky because it's too hot inside. Women queue up for water early in the morning and carry pots of water through areas which sometimes can be flooded or sometimes are even cracked with high summer temperatures. And children find it really hard to study with no lights or dim lights in homes which have very poor cross ventilation, and elders are almost collapsing from heat strokes, and the disabled are completely ignored with absolutely no medical aid close by. So climate change in Bengaluru is a story of infrastructural injustice, resource inequality, and neglected resilience. And when we are talking about the water stress, it's so real for vulnerable communities, because it's not just about how much water there is, but also who controls it. The tanker mafias sell water to settlements that aren't on the city's official map, and borewells go deeper every year, and while shared taps go dry by like mid-Feb or March sometimes. Ironically, during the monsoons, it is again the same settlements which are the first to flood, and the city's drainage logic completely excludes them, both literally and figuratively, I can say. So this twin crisis of water, where there is too little or too much, falls hardest on those who are living in these really precarious areas. And talking about housing and the informal workers is another topic, where mostly it is construction laborers and street vendors and power karmikas who are climate's first responders, but they are hardly recognized as such. And rising temperatures mean fewer working hours for them, falling wages, even during floods, it's the same situation. And all of this impacts their health. Um, and floods also mean losing their tools, their goods, their the little belonging, the little stuff that they call their belongings, is all gone, and all of this without any insurance. And housing in a city like Bengaluru is unaffordable, and yet entire families live in these settlements where the next eviction notice is never far away. And in such a context, climate vulnerability in this city is like, intimately linked with labor, land, and livelihood, and the climate of fear as to what's going to happen. So, in the midst of all of this, let's not also forget that this is Bengaluru, the city of science, technology, and global innovation. A city that's kind of sends satellites into space but cannot get its water, waste, or housing systems in order. It's a shame and a failure that despite world-class research institutions, urban think tanks, and high-tech governance tools, we have allowed planning to collapse, especially for the most basic rights such as water, shelter, clean air, drainage, mobility, healthcare, and so on. And as always, it is the poor who suffer the consequences most, not because they are unprepared, but because the city has systematically refused to plan for them. And it is here where we must pause and reflect on the role of local governance, because wards are the spaces where climate impacts are first felt, and they must be areas where the action first begins. So without empowered ward committees and climate action plans at the ward level, such vulnerable communities will remain invisible in city budgets, in emergency response plans, or even in long-term planning. So we need a climate action plan in every ward, designed with the community participation led by data and all the research that is happening at institutions across the city, and the plans implemented with accountability to ensure that nobody is left behind. And this is how we can democratize resilience, by placing the tools and the information and the decision making in the hands of the people who live the reality of climate crisis every day. So this report is more than data. It holds the mirror of to the planners and decision makers. It's a mirror and also a map, because it reflects the realities of climate injustice in our city, and it points us towards what must change. It tells us what we need: climate governance that starts from the margins and not from the master plans, investments in infrastructure that builds dignity and not just resilience, that includes piped water, stormwater drains, school roofs, shaded public spaces, and more. Then ward level climate action plans that recognize hyperlocal risks and responses, recognition of climate work already being done by variety of organizations, informal communities, and such partnerships which also respect the agency of the vulnerable communities. So, as a closing thought, I think we should all remember that Bengaluru's resilience will not come from AI dashboards or smart city blueprints, but it will come from acknowledging the intelligence, the lived experiences, and the priorities of those who live the city's climate future every day. And to center all of that is not just being just, but it is that I think is I would like to say being smart, because what works for the most vulnerable will eventually safeguard all of us. So once again, a heartfelt congratulations to the Socratus and BSF teams and all the partnering organizations who made this report possible. And I wish you all good luck, because this report needs to travel very far. It needs to open the doors that have remained shut. This is not the end of the work, but a powerful milestone in the journey ahead. Thank you so much for making me a part of this launch, and congratulations again. Thank you. Over to Hansika.
Thank you so much, Bhargavi, for such powerful points. And you're very right. This is not an end, but just a beginning for us. So all of you online, please hang around. We have some plans for next steps, and you'd love to invite you to kind of collaborate with us. But right now, over to our next speaker for today, Pratigna. I would like to invite Pratigna to speak a little bit about this report in the context of her work on urban resilience. And before that, I'd just quickly introduce her. Pratigna Punacha Kodera is a researcher and practitioner who works on climate change adaptation, focusing broadly on how social and environmental systems respond to impacts of climate change, especially in urban and peri-urban geographies. Specifically, her work looks at livelihood transitions, nature-based solutions as adaptation, and the intersection of climate change and the built environment. Pratigna is experienced in enabling and engaging in multi-stakeholder processes for dialogue and decision-making using approaches such as transformative scenario planning and appreciative inquiry. In the process, she is interested in unpacking the complexity of participatory decision-making, especially in the urban context. I also know her internet might be struggling a little bit, so let's see if this is working right now. Pratigna, over to you.
Thank you so much. I hope you all can hear me. I am having some internet trouble at my end. So just let me know if you all can't hear me or if I've sort of frozen or something like that. But anyway, thank you so much for inviting me to this discussion. Huge congratulations to the BSF team, to the Socratus team, and the Global Resilience Partnership for bringing out this really timely report. I think, as Bhargavi put it, it's something that you pick up and you don't want to put it down until you finish, because the data is so rich. And not only is it rich, but it's also so accessible and simply written. And also, I thought the methodology that you've used is very simple but systematic. And I think it gives a lot of people who are working in this space, in addition to decision makers who would like to look at it, a lot of nuance and understanding about the impacts of climate change on vulnerable communities in Bangalore. So thank you so much for that. And also the entry point that you all have taken, which is water. I think it's something that is so relevant as an entry point for vulnerable communities in Bangalore, be it water scarcity or excess water logging, flooding, or health impacts because of waterborne diseases. I think there are so many aspects of water that sort of intersect with the impacts of climate change, and it's only sort of getting worse by the day. And it's a really powerful way to think about impacts of climate change in the city. But anyway, I'm not going to dwell too much about the impacts of climate change. We know about it, but also it's amply written in the report, and even Bhargavi spoke about it. However, I do want to sort of come back to this one point. You can go to the next slide, which is basically climate change impacts are not felt equally among its citizens of any city. Just as the city is unequal, it's divided into many spaces and places. The impacts of climate change are also differentiated that way, depending on who you are, on intrinsic characters like, are you a male or a female? Are you old or young, children, or elderly, disabled? All of these factors definitely differently affect people in terms of where you are, where are you located in the city, and like what kind of a livelihood are you engaged with. And I do want to again acknowledge the team for such wonderful illustrations in the book, and I've sort of picked it up in this presentation. I hope that's okay, but really to say that the illustrations also add another very interesting layer to the reading of the report. But coming back to the point of the impacts of climate change being differentiated across different axes. So it's rather interesting and very important as well that you have sort of picked different groups to do this FGD with, and the results of different groups sort of reflect the differentiated challenges that different communities sort of encounter because of climate change. As you delve further into the intersections within each of these groups that you all have spoken with, we realize that there are more nuances even within those groups. But however, this differentiated approach is something that's really helpful to think about when we think about responses to climate change and impacts in the city, and when we craft climate actions. Can we go to the next slide, please? So how then do you think of going from coping to adaptation, all of this while building resilience. You all can click, yeah. Click, click, click. I had hoped that the control of this would be with me, but in any case, that's fine. So basically to say that we have seen many evidence of coping in the report itself, how people are just coping to the impacts of climate change, to say waterlogging, flooding inside the houses, how people are say, spending all their savings on repairing houses that have been damaged due to flooding. But we do have to move from coping, which is, and if you look at the definitions that I've picked these definitions up from the IPCC reports, we do have to move from coping, which is typically short term to medium term, to a slightly longer term thinking, which is around adaptation, which is really to, enable communities to adjust to long term and or what is expected changes to occur in the climate system in the most beneficial way. So the moving from coping, what we are doing right now, what most vulnerable communities are doing right now, I think has to shift from that sort of a mindset and approach, which is more adaptation sort of oriented. And all of this while building resilience, because whether it is now or in the future, one does need to respond to climate change, and that response has to be resilient in its nature. I mean, we do have to sort of be able to bounce back into what we were doing in order to continue and in fact build back better. So there are some principles around which one should think about moving from coping to adaptation and building resilience. One, of course, that the responses has to be systemic. We cannot, look at piecemeal approaches to responses. It has to be system wide. We have to think about entire, be it infrastructure systems or be it any other kinds of systems. We have to think about it from multiple entry points so that action in one doesn't lead to malaction or maldevelopment in another. The second point really is all of this, whether it is adaptation or building resilience, is built and has to be built on good and inclusive development. So development is still priority. Climate action is sitting on the bedrock of good development. And unless we aim to have good development outcomes, it is very difficult to then also achieve good climate actions or good climate outcomes. And I think the report also refers to this quite a bit. Bhargavi did in her talk earlier, that there are so many stakeholders involved in this system. And I think this multi-stakeholder approach is central to making sure that everybody who has some stake in it has to be involved in order to have holistic solutions, including government stakeholders, including vulnerable communities in the first place, all the NGOs and other organizations that work with communities, research organizations, think tanks. So this, and I think Bangalore as a city is quite rich in all of these multitude of stakeholders who've done work in each of their spaces. And I think it's really important to have many more spaces where we can bring all these multiple stakeholders together, institutions together, in order to build something long-term for the city and for communities. And finally, it has to be participatory. It cannot be a top-down approach, which we have seen in many of our planning approaches, both in the city but also nationally. We do have to prioritize participation. And I think, again, a shout out to the report that does do this in a participatory way, that does sort of bring out the voices of vulnerable communities to the fore. And so even in planning, even in institutionalization of certain actions or plans or policies, I think there needs to be a lot more participation from all stakeholders involved. If you could move to the next slide. So I want to reflect slightly from an example of a participatory multi-stakeholder process that we ran a couple of years ago, a few years ago almost. It was looking at the future of water security in Bangalore. But the point I want to make using this example is that participatory processes are time-consuming, they are long, and I think organizations or whoever is working in this space must be open to investing that kind of time and effort into processes like these. So we ran this multi-stakeholder process using a method called transformative scenario planning, which was basically a futures thinking scenario planning exercise, bringing in over 60 stakeholders from across the water system in Bangalore to reflect about what would be the future of water security in Bangalore by 2030. If you could move to the next slide. So, I mean, the transformative scenario planning process it is a guided process through multiple steps. But the interesting part was that stakeholders together in a lot of discussion over multiple sessions over 18 months came up with two very important sort of axes of action. One was collaborative action and one appropriate institutions in order to build a safe and secure future for water in Bangalore by 2030. But I think more importantly, apart from this process, I think the more important outcome was the fact that, over time, over 18 months, we were able to bring several different stakeholders together over multiple sessions that it sort of kind of built a relationship with one another. So, there were government officials who were talking to community leaders, and research institutions. So whenever there was, in the future, whenever there was any problem, they knew who they had to reach out to. So we kind of built an ecosystem, which was quite useful. And I think we should take up more efforts like this. If you could move to the next slide. So I'm going to end with this, which is the current project that we are working on. We're looking at, it's a project called Climate Change Local Adaptation Pathways. It's funded by FCDO. But the whole idea of the project is to really look at, can we think about migration as an adaptation strategy for poor and vulnerable communities? And the goal, especially in Bangalore, is to support poor and marginalized communities to successfully adapt to climate change using migration. And also, we do have in this report an entire group of section that focuses on migrants. And I think migrants face very particular challenges when it comes to climate change adaptation. Much of the times, migration is also sort of if not driven, it's sort of exacerbated by climate change impacts in their source, and they come into destinations where also they continue to face other kinds of climate change impacts. And in a sort of circumstance where they're not necessarily well embedded to the city, they don't know the political systems or the institutional systems or the governance systems. So the idea is to support marginalized migrant communities by integrating their needs into urban climate action plans. And in Bangalore, I think we are at a moment right now where we have a great opportunity through this Bangalore Climate Action Plan. If you could go to the next slide. The Bangalore Climate Action Plan was launched, I think, last year. And it has a great promise to sort of localize climate action. And I know that now they're even getting into the ward level sort of implementation, or even understanding what actions can be taken at the ward level for climate action in Bangalore. So our proposal really is to create a migrant inclusive climate action plan, which is like a complementary document to the Bangalore Climate Action Plan, which aims to sort of, again, integrate needs and vulnerabilities of migrants so that they are recognized as important stakeholders in the planning and the implementation of the climate action plan. And I will stop here, but the sort of the call to everybody on this discussion, on this webinar, is really to come join us in this effort to create the Migrant Inclusive Climate Action Plan, which we are hoping will be co-created with a lot more stakeholders, working on the ground with communities, with government actors, so that this can be a document that is owned by communities and all the people who've put together, and we can sort of push the administration to take note of migrants as a vulnerable community, as well as implement actions that strengthen their resilience and builds adaptation. So thank you so much. I pass it over to Hansika.
Thank you so much, Pratigna. And your internet worked really well, so great. It's a good day today. The Migrant Inclusive Climate Action Plan is so timely. Thank you so much for sharing about that. But also the transformative scenario planning process that you spoke about is so powerful. It's such a powerful futures exercise to kind of get people to collaboratively move away from a prediction mindset to a more plausible, possible, preferable mindset, which is really needed. So an open invitation to all of the kind of organizations working on similar things. And I know a lot of them are, including ours, to kind of join forces and, just more work on these important issues. With that, I think I will move on to our next speaker. I would now like to invite Shuchi Vora to speak a bit about the report in the context of art-based approaches for resilience building and adaptation to climate change. Shuchi has more than a decade of experience in designing and implementing community-led programs for droughts, floods, urban and rural water resilience, approaching them from a transdisciplinary and system change lens. Currently, she's the head of learning at the Global Resilience Partnership, where she weaves community of practice, designs learning experiences, and facilitates learning to action process on adaptation and resilience. Over to you, Shuchi.
Thanks, Hansika. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for that kind introduction. And it's been so amazing listening to both of you, Bhargavi, Pratigna. It's a tough act to follow, to be honest. And the second thing that's going on in my mind is the fact that I'm here in a bit of a changed position. Generally, I'd be the one talking about water. That's something that's really close to my heart. So I'm so glad that's the entry point to this project. But believe me that I had nothing to do with that. I did not influence Socratus to work on water, but it was really the arts-based lens and arts-based approaches to resilience evidence that brings me here. I would also like to say that arts and bottom-up resilience are both really close to my heart. So I'm really grateful that I'm part of this conversation where a change that I could nudge, I can kind of see, fruiting. It'll probably fruit eventually. So anyway, very glad to be here. Yeah. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. And I'll start with the report. It was such a lovely read. I think my predecessors have both alluded to the fact that it's beautiful. The illustrations are beautiful, testament to, the fact that it was meant to be an arts-based exercise. And the fact that you've used arts even in working with the communities brought up this aspect of how arts it works as a language that connects across experiences and it draws out the lived experiences so beautifully. And something that struck me really close and something that we at GRP are working with really closely currently is this aspect of the tension between the individual and systemic resilience, which both Pratigna and Bhargavi talked about in terms of that there is past research, recent research that's come out where academics from the Global South have very strongly argued about the fact that what we term as vulnerable communities, what can be termed as frontline communities or marginalized communities are not resilient because it's an attribute. It's something that they keep doing because it's exhausting to be resilient as individuals in the face of systemic and infrastructural injustice, as Bhargavi put it. So there is need for systemic resilience. You've very beautifully articulated the need for tenure. I think something that often gets left out in the mix of larger conversations has come out so well with the use of these arts-based approaches. The second thing that I felt very strongly within this report was this aspect of community agency and their own agency to articulate what their lived experiences around how the climate is changing, what evidence exists to climate change itself, but also what evidence exists to their resilience and their systemic resilience as well. What are the systems that are supporting them? What are the systems that are not supporting them? So thank you for that. And that using this experience, I want to talk a little bit about arts-based approaches in general. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And in the picture, I have a really cool exercise that was a arts-based approach that was carried out in Cameroon. This group called Noble Arts, they worked to create a theater performance on food insecurity in conflict areas. And it was beautifully done. They have a YouTube video that's on the GRP playlist as well. So please feel free to go and look at that. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the Arts for Resilience Knowledge into Use Awards that we've been running since 2022. We started out with the intention to expand the definition of what resilience evidence actually is and the way it is being put into use. There's a lot of gap between the policies, the science policy discourse, and where the community discourse is. Often the community is absent, often the voices from ground up are missing at various levels, including the presence of Global South academics, the glass ceilings with respect to women academics, policymakers, businesses, and so on. So there was that need to expand this idea of a very specific form of resilience, very specific form of evidence, and how it was being put to use. So we came up with this idea of linking resilience evidence with arts, because arts is the way we express ourselves as humans. It's a universal language in so many ways. And yes, it departs from this conventional mode of scientific evidence, but it's a very real, very relatable tool that we all use in our lives. So that was the idea behind why it was important. And in our experience, we probably gave, I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, but we've probably given about 16 to 20 awards until now. And what we found was that art is not just important for communicating evidence, which is something that often is, the primary way in which scientists use arts for that science communication. But it can also act as very crucial evidence in itself, like this theater performance. The script was co-developed with communities who were directly affected by food insecurity and nutritional insecurity. The performances, the actors were folks who were directly affected by these issues. And it can provide a very useful language across different audiences. So for instance, some of these processes have been adopted by local municipalities, or some of them have been picked up by local research organizations, and so on. So it's there is an element of partnerships that has come into play. There is an element how art has democratized that knowledge, how art has surfaced that knowledge and that evidence from ground up. And the Climate Charche report, as Bhargavi rightly pointed out, is only beginning to do so. This launch is only beginning that process of surfacing lived experience. If you can go to the next slide, please. And I'd like to end with this particular example. This is from Nepal, organization called Youth Innovation Lab. They are actually a flood modeling organization. They got young children to paint this flood modeling experience, this model, and the evidence that they were getting from their model onto a wall for a village, for a small town actually, in Nepal. However, what they realized was that a lot of these kids painting had very real lived experiences of how much, what were the flood levels. This was a gap in very low resolution models in areas like Nepal, and this exercise where these kids were actually painting flood experience, which is the first picture on your left, actually became about kids actually talking about, oh, the flood that came up to here, or the flood that came up to here. And it actually started acting as evidence in itself, in terms of what that evidence meant, how it was executed. The municipality actually picked up some of that evidence and used it for early warning systems in that area. So a very beautiful process of how it began as science communication, brought out even older memories, intergenerational memories, young people's memories, and then acted as evidence itself within policy as well. I'd like to end my conversation today with a call. Actually, I've put a link in chat. You can go to the last slide. That's fine. I can leave my email on the screen for a bit. But there's a paper that we're doing where we are synthesizing some of these approaches that we have learned about, and we feel that practice and policy are lagging behind, or rather, sorry, policy and academia are lagging behind practice when it comes to this specific topic of arts-based approaches within resilience. So we're doing a paper around arts-based approaches to capture some of this. Teammates from Socratus are a part of this process as well. And it would be really cool if any of you are interested, have case studies that you've implemented, have examples that you know of, please feel free to use the Google Form link. It's also open to more collaborators in that article. So there is an option for you to choose whether you'd like to be a collaborator or co-author on the paper, or whether you'd just like to share your case. So feel free to step in to this process, open invitation to everyone. And that's it. Thank you. And congratulations once again to the Socratus and BSF teams for getting this process going for Bangalore.
Thank you so much, Shuchi. Thank you for reiterating that very important point that art is not just about communicating evidence as we traditionally sometimes resort to seeing it, but also as a tool for building evidence on data blind spots. And yes, please respond to if you know anybody who is doing an interesting art-based project, please kind of forward the link that Shuchi shared in the chat to them. We would love to hear from them. Moving on, I would now like to invite my colleague Bhargavi Nagendra, who has been leading our work on deepening ward-level local governance for a couple of years now. And a lot of this work has built upon the work she has been leading even before I joined Socrates. She'll speak more about the FGD process, followed by my colleague Rohit Madhu, who has written a decent chunk of this report. And both of them will walk us through kind of the process of the FGD and the report. This will be followed by my colleague Srinidhi Gurunath, whose default mode is deep visual storytelling, and he'll speak more about our approach to art at Socrates more generally and what we did in this work. He will be joined along with our brilliant illustrator Shruti Prabhu, who we now know is really good at her job, but also a very, very patient and kind human being with all the iterations of this work that we have kind of sent her way. So over to you, Bhargavi, and pass it along to others as you go.
Yes, thank you, Hansika. I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes, we can.
Yes, I'm not many times do we get two Bhargavis in the panel, so don't get confused. I'm not Bhargavi Rao. I do want to follow, I am trying to follow her footsteps and at someday be known like Bhargavi Rao. I'm this Bhargavi Nagendra, and I will take a couple of minutes to take you through what the purpose and the process of this whole report stands for. And I think through our work for Socrates at least, what emerged from our work at the ward level through the Namaward Namadhwani project, where the central question we asked was, what does a flourishing, fair, and a just ward in a thriving city like Bangalore, in a thriving city like Bangalore, what does that look like, right? So we did a series of listening exercises from various groups, and this helped us understand what localized climate risk and also sort of showcased a range of coping and adaptation strategies that were practiced at a hyper-local level. So similarly, around the time the BCAP was launched, which is the Bangalore Climate Action Plan, and we felt that based on our ward work, there are groups whose perspectives will be a good supplement to the city level climate action plan. So, which is why we included the elements of action plans from the BCAP while designing for the focus group discussion as well. So in a way, it's talking to the already existing climate action plan. So as you see, like the objective was to try and provide a localized account of climate risks and showcase a range of the strategies that are already practiced by the at-risk groups. And in addition,
what we tried to do was identify critical opportunities to secure transformative climate resilience within the identified communities. And this is also based on some of the insights that we gathered from rights-based advocacy groups, community-based organizations, and other sort of experts in the city. Next slide, please. So we use water as an entry level for designing the focus group discussions, since the availability, the access, and the use of water has implications at various levels, including individual, household, and neighborhood or city level. And water is also critical at the place of residence and at work, right? And the kind of seasonal changes that takes place will have very important implications for lives and livelihoods, especially for the groups that we spoke to. And water availability and accessibility is very closely interlinked with other phenomena. And we'll speak about that more as Rohit explains some of the insights. So, these are interlinked with heat, flooding, and also at a systemic level, like with health, infrastructure, and sanitation. Next slide, please. So this is roughly, the slide showcases what's the process we took and the kind of groups we spoke about. So we used the Bangalore Climate Action Plan's frame of climate hazards, vulnerabilities, and action sectors to guide the FGD design, and also for the selection of communities who we spoke to. We spoke to 8 community groups based on analysis and also the availability of the partner organizations. So as you can see, we spoke to street vendors, migrant workers, ASHA workers, gig workers, women from low-income settlements, domestic workers, also flood-affected communities, and Paurakarmikas. For those who don't know, Paurakarmikas are street sweepers, and they collect waste house to house, and this is specific to Bangalore, I think, or other parts of the state. So we held 3 focus group discussion calls with field associates to understand community context and climate related work. Many of the organizations that we spoke to were already doing some sort of awareness, capacity building. So we understood what they were doing, and we set expectations for the focus group discussion. And then also in many of the focus group discussions, they came in as co-facilitators and sometimes as participants. Next slide, please. So just how we approached this was also interesting. We had very simple activities to start these conversations. For those who are interested, we had like a simple activity of pick and tell. We had series of photographs of depicting different aspects of water, right? So there was flooded streets, water tankers, long queues of water stagnation. So this icebreaker activity, we asked anyone to pick a photograph that they could relate to or they wanted to, and then start talking about it and how they associated with it. So this helped us surface a lot more stories, and it was easier to connect some of these other aspects of climate change and their coping mechanisms through the stories. And yeah, so we use these as the conversation prompts. So we spoke about coping and adaptation. We spoke about the reflections, also how they used early warning systems and what could be the other potential initiatives and the limits to their current coping strategies, right? All of this was also shared with experts who are dealing with resilience to connect some of the community insights with the ongoing research and practices. And this helped us also to identify how policies, programs can be better addressed for the community needs. I now hand it over to Rohit to speak about some of the insights and how the report has been structured. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to quickly take you through some of the findings of the report. Obviously, the report does a much better job, and you should definitely give it a read. They've been divided broadly into 5 themes, and the first one deals with people's perception on climate stresses. And I felt that this is important to highlight because across groups, there was consensus that the city is witnessing highly erratic weather patterns, which in turn are leading to first order and second order effects on health, livelihood, and many other domains of life. there's some indication that climate stresses are likely to become an important political concern for the city, and it's high time that we take it very, very seriously. The other thing that sort of surfaced is that the link between climate extremes and effects of urbanization, mainly loss of water bodies and green cover, were repeated again and again. Next slide. The second thing, and I think this is a very crucial part of the report, is that it highlights that housing and land tenure status are critical determinants of climate vulnerability. We've already heard that about how many informal settlements tend to be located in low-lying and flood-prone areas. On top of that, the use of makeshift structures for construction and the lack of public infrastructure like drainage systems in some of these settlements make them especially risk-prone. Respondents highlighted that their informal status prevented them from accessing flood protection measures and also inhibited them from investing in long-term adaptation. Instead, they just had to do short-term fixes. And the constant threat of eviction was a major cause for anxiety and increased people's own perception of vulnerability. Next slide, please. We've already spoken a lot about water, but just reiterating that water insecurity across most groups that we've discussed was a critical vulnerability, and extreme weather events are making them worse. Water supply in informal settlements is insufficient, barely enough to meet the needs of households, and also erratic, means released during odd hours, irregular timings, and this causes much anxiety, especially for the women of the household. And on top of that, when you have climate stressors like floods, hot summers, this caused further disruptions to water access, and then that led to increase in cost, both financial as well as labor hours of procuring water. Stressors, you have poor housing conditions, uncertain access to basic goods like food, water, and electricity. And then you have livelihood patterns, which all sort of combine to create health risks. What also emerged from a lot of the FGD conversations is that the rise in vector-borne diseases, and you're seeing it throughout the year, and its effect on children was quite disastrous. And in the face of sickness, we heard again and again that people reported self-medicating or ignoring their symptoms altogether because healthcare was just not accessible or available. This one about livelihoods, again, the learning was that extreme weather events and changing climate transform the nature and terms of work for many different livelihood groups. Erratic and unpredictable weather was one of the reasons, and this was highly disruptive to outdoor-based livelihoods like gig work, street vending, powder karmikas, etc. When homes flooded, we heard that many women reported missing work and losing income just in order to put the home back together. And you also have gig workers, ASHA workers, and domestic workers reporting that extreme weather events altered the conditions of their work, making their work tougher and longer. And you can read the report for exactly how that's happening for these different livelihoods. Slide. Now I'll take you through different elements of the report. One thing we've sort of been talking about is that this report is not just text. There are many elements which sort of like build a complex and dynamic picture of how climate vulnerability and risk is constructed. First one, we have short summaries at the beginning of each section, which describe how climate stressors intersect with different domains of people's lives. You also have several quotes from respondents, which are distributed across the booklet to give you a sense of how climatic impacts are experienced in everyday realities. Impact of these stressors, you will see, is reflected in the form of flooded homes, lost documents, being unable to travel to work, falling sick very often, and other things. Next slide. There are also very beautiful illustrations that highlight snippets of conversations that occurred during the FGD process and throw some light on this whole ordeal. Next one. We have a few case studies, and the point of these case studies is to illuminate how you have climate stressors, you have socio-cultural vulnerabilities, and developmental challenges and failures, which intersect to create unique patterns of climate risk across in neighborhoods, but also in households. There are 3 case studies in total, and one of them is displayed here. The one here is about an informal settlement located close to a large drainage canal or nala, which makes it particularly prone to flooding. However, flooding also occurs due to a different reason. There's a lack of waste collection, which causes drains to be blocked in the area. Each time it floods, we heard that households lost up to rupees 10,000 in damages and repair. This is leaving aside the psychological stress of dealing with frequent floods. And we heard that across the community, the capacity to adapt varied considerably, with some being able to leverage social and political capital to access support, while others had to simply support themselves. The city's housing scenario has also limited people's ability to adapt and put a hard stop on it. because several respondents we spoke to were renters, and the high cost of housing in the city prevented them from moving away, and instead they were just forced to contend with floods year after year. From the other two case studies, you can find them in the report. Finally, we have some opportunities for impact, which were derived from, as Bhargavi said, the FGD insights as well as dialogues with subject matter experts. One of them depicted here calls for the creation of a knowledge commons, which will help assimilate data on climate risk and vulnerability, and also integrate findings from all the different activities and initiatives that are happening across the city. The idea is that such a knowledge commons will help highlight critical gaps in our knowledge and also prevent duplication of efforts. Yeah, finally, we've identified these different opportunities and map them to stakeholders who are working in the city. These two visualizations will allow the reader to identify areas of urgent action that are relevant to their own work. And we hope you can take some inspiration and carry forward. Finally, I really recommend that you check out the annexure, which I think is the beautiful part of this document, which showcases some of the activities that were used for eliciting responses and also has a long list of quotes and insights from different FGDs. They'll be particularly useful for organizations or movements looking to advance climate work in specific areas and neighborhoods. I'll stop there and hand it over to Srinidhi, who will talk a little bit about the art perspective project. Thank you.
I think we can go to the next slide. Yes, so I think we're also running short on time, and I'll quickly take you through the visual story process with Shruti. So a part of making notes for the FGD is that often emotions and sort of other smaller nuances like body posture and things sort of get left out, which makes art like a good place to sort of start and capture smaller nuances, which we often don't. Next slide, please. It often helps in sort of the world building of where the people are coming from and what they're talking about. For instance, this is a sketch from the Paurakarmika FGD where they're describing the landscape where they're in, and it also takes note of the different sort of housing they are in, and to sort of give a much deeper understanding of the world they live in. And I sort of hand it over to Shruti to talk about how these came to be and how we proceeded forward with this.
Thanks, Srinidhi. From the sketches from the FGD, the live sketching from the FGDs, this was a part of the process where we started developing these personas of different community groups, as Rohit and others have highlighted. And this was a part of how the iteration of how it went from the sketches to the middle stage of coming to all these community groups and how we took it forward. Srinidhi?
Yes. So also another thing, when people are talking about separate objects, or they're talking about separate instances. And while trying to put that together and try to cohesively put it together, it makes a much broader and larger difference. For instance, when we are hearing about gig delivery workers or talking about separate instance of having shaded trees or better public transport so that they can have better space to move around in the city and do their job better. When we put it together, it starts to seem like a more livable city for all of us. Or for instance, like the umbrella for the ASHA worker who they had to like sort of fight with the administration for having to protect themselves while taking service, makes more sense when they're depicted in the street surveying people under harsher weather conditions. Next, please. And we also started, as we started illustrating, we started seeing sort of commonalities between different groups. And we started seeing that people were often very unsure about the water supply, or there were different sort of adaptations which people, coping and adaptation pathways which people took when their houses got flooded. And Shruti, over to you to sort of how you put together the illustrations post that.
So we wanted the tone of the report, not just the illustration, the design, everything, to not just highlight the risks and the challenges, but also move towards a more hopeful future. And the core of the report, as everyone has been talking about, is water. So the theme, the central theme, was to give a feeling of the different challenges and the different this part is for the opportunities section. to bring out the water aspect of the illustration. Srinidhi?
Yes. So, in sort of conclusion, when we are talking about arts-based approaches in Socrates, we have often seen that many times art becomes like a convergent part of the process when trying to put things together. And also, at times, they've become the part where work starts. Eventually, they sort of become interstitial spaces for us when we try to sort of surface the collective wisdom of everyone. And with that, I hand it over to you, Hansika.
Thank you so much, Srinidhi. And thank you, Shruti, for walking us through the hard journey of kind of visualizing a lot of this. I remember really sometimes heated discussions even coming up where we would just spend time thinking about, are we exaggerating, are we tokenizing, and how to get that right tone and the balance of the issues and the tone. I think we have responded to most of the questions in the chat already, but if you've missed any, please kind of reach out to us. We'll put our email IDs in the chat and on the screen shortly. Also, a reminder that the Kannada version of this report is under process and will be ready no later than maybe a week to 10 days. And we'll share it with everybody who's registered for the webinar. Quickly, as a part of the next steps, we are going to use the report to design a small exhibition, highlighting the stories as well as the opportunities for impact. And we want to take it back to these communities and other communities even to continue the important dialogue that this has kickstarted for us. We would love to partner with any of you who want to use this or any other art-based approaches to have these critical conversations. Please do reach out to us if this is of interest. How do we foresee the report being used? This was something that we kind of also sat with for a while because we all have written a lot of reports in our careers that don't get used. We have already done a roundtable based on this report, and the link to that is available on the last page of the report, both a link and a QR code. And that was also a very interesting moment for us to bring a lot of community-based organizations and think tanks into some interesting conversations about shared language. We will continue to do more of these, at least we intend to. And we are looking forward to seeing what you take out of it and how it feeds into your existing and ongoing work. So please do share how you, or feel free to brainstorm with us on these potential opportunities. At Socrates, we're exploring other themes in urban life like heat, water circularity, ward level action. If any of these are interesting to you, please do reach out to us. And again, reiterating that BSF, as mentioned earlier, does some amazing, wonderful work. And if any of their activities under Climate Charche or any of the other work is of interest, please reach out to them. Next slide, please. I think we have the email IDs of both. Yes, so on the screen, you have email IDs of both organizations. Feel free to reach out. And with that, I would like to close this session. Thank you so much to the speakers, to my team members, and all of you wonderful participants for joining us today. And we look forward to continue having these important conversations with all of you. Thank you so much. Bye.